Boo's awesome new show on CNBC Africa. So kick down those doors and join us.
I am building my brand.
Get up and go get it. If you can't get it, kick down those doors.
Tuesdays at 8:30 p.m. on CNBC Africa.
Hello and a warm welcome to Personal Finance. I am Gugulethu Cele. Joining me today is Sean Levitan, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Colorfield. Now, this is to talk us through the theme of goal-based investing for individuals. Sounds like big words, but tonight we're going to decipher this evening, Sean. Maybe if we take a look at goal-based investing, we always hear from certified financial planners that everyone is individual. You need to do a measured assessment, and I take it that's the fundamentals of tonight's discussion.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. Goals-based investing is a new acronym that's come through more recently, and I think that most people will turn around and go, well, isn't that what we always did, investing relative to one's goals? But I think what we've done by using the term internationally as well as in South Africa is to try and take that step right at the beginning and say that ultimately what's important is a goal, and you cannot set an investment strategy without being cognizant of that goal.
Talk us through one of these goals, which has to be pensions or retirement savings, where we know in South Africa we underperformers in that regard. I understand only, 6% of South Africans can afford to retire comfortably? That's a scary number.
Well, one that's not too different, I think, around the world. I mean, South Africa may have our own problems, but this is a global financial crisis when it comes to pensions. Sometimes remind ourselves that a retirement provision is there to try and maintain our standard of living in retirement. And what is a good standard of living? Well, I think it's one that maintains your income needs when you get there. And that's the goal as far as individuals are concerned.
Sometimes that's confusing, though, for consumers, because we always hear, 75% of your actual income. We get lost in all these percentages and numbers which are based. But like you say, in simple terms, you need to be able to live.
Absolutely. And it's a lot easier than targeting a mythical pot, say R1 million. What does that mean? At least a percentage of your income is something that is more tangible and more real to you. People are used to thinking in terms of income. When you go away somewhere, that you're going to a new city, it's not uncommon to say, well, what's my budget per day? My accommodation, my food, my leisure, maybe my insurance. And then you'll take that amount per day and multiply it by the number of days that you're away. We always think in terms of income. And so it's quite of the salary is where you have to start adding on. But in terms of a budget, that is something that is quite normal to be thinking of.
Something else that tends to happen with a lot of consumers, especially in the South African environment, is that we like to build up on assets. You find people purchasing multiple properties thinking that they'll live off the rental income, which either works or doesn't work for other individuals. Others want equity and all sorts of assets. Is that the bigger goal when it comes to goal-based investing?
How do you know if you have enough? And how do you frame that in context? We've recently had a lot of market volatility in South Africa. And so we've seen portfolios fall. That's a time when people tend to panic. That's when people maybe dump their shares at the wrong time. They lose a bit of perspective. Now, what if I told you that at the same time, interest rates rose? Doesn't always happen, but that's what happened in this particular week. We saw the long-dated bonds selling off. We saw inflation-linked bonds becoming cheaper. And so what happened is that the cost of securing your level of income is the goal. That became cheaper also. So the asset side of your balance sheet may have reduced, but the liability side, which is not something that we normally focus on, also reduced. And so the need to panic in that instance was reduced. Now, had you not articulated that goal and measured it, you may not have actually realized that your position had not actually been as bad as you thought.
Sure. So given what we've seen in the recent market volatility, especially for those who are closer to the age of retiring, I take it don't panic is obviously the key message that we have.
I think you should never panic. But I think in this instance, you need to have a framework or a measurement in terms of where you are measuring your strategy. And certainly if it's relative to the goal of paying out or securing a level of income in retirement, it definitely wasn't as bad as you might have thought on first glance of your share portfolio. But I think when you make the point about owning other properties or having equities, you always have to ask yourself why. Why am I assuming risk? Ultimately, you could be in an investment like an inflation-linked bond, which gives you very It's not going to give you a means to get your goal. When you invest in equities, you are really saying, I need to take risk, which is a tool that's going to allow me to get to my goal eventually. And once you're there, take the risk off the table, but at least have a measurement or a framework or a benchmark that is relative, that's meaningful for you. And that's the crux of the essence of goals-based investing. It's articulating your goal and then measuring your investment strategy relative to it.
The framework that you allude to, how often should that be reviewed? Because life happens, and sometimes you might look back, as you say,
yes,
at the fundamentals and realize, well, I'm not achieving my goal. Does this mean I need to go heavier into equities or look at other asset classes to invest in?
And it's not only that. That's just the investment side. I think you should be looking at it formally at least once a year. I think in terms of the statements we get from our retirement funds or the various retirement product providers, it should speak about income, not necessarily that pot of money. And there are a number of instant things that will change all the time. It's changing, interest rates moving, inflation emerging, and your own personal circumstances changing. So, for example, dependence, you may change your contribution rates, you may change your retirement age. All of these things are moving variables that have a very big impact on your retirement strategy or your investment strategy.
Having said that, though, I want us to go back to the individuals like my father, who's 60 and looking forward to his days in retirement in the next 5 years. But what should he be doing, and the questions that he needs to be asking the individuals who manage his money?
Okay, so the very first thing he should understand is what level of income is he on track to achieve. And that's a very important consideration. To know the pot of money that he may retire on does not give him any level of comfort. We're very fortunate in South Africa with a thriving insurance market. It's not very difficult to get a sense of what level of income could he secure in retirement. The next thing he needs to do is decide, is that enough? It's cold comfort for me to say, well, I got you 75%. 60% is enough. He needs to decide whether that is sufficient. Once you've seen whether you are on track and whether it's sufficient or not, you are then able to use tools at your disposal to get you to your goal. Now, there are only 3 things that he can do. The one is he can contribute more. Secondly, he could decide potentially to retire later or have another job after, if there is a mandatory retirement age. Or the third one is to take on more investment risk. It's a combination of those 3 that are going to allow him to get the goal. And if he's on track for his goal already, why take the equity risk? Why not be in something more conservative? And when I say conservative, I definitely don't mean cash. That's probably the most risky asset to be in. I'm talking about something that's going to move in a way relative that his annuity that he'll purchase will move in. And that's normally inflation-linked bonds.
Which are less risky, as you allude to.
Less risky relative to that goal, but not less risky in actual percentage terms. I could invest in an inflation-linked bond and be minus less risk. But I'll tell you that the annuity you were going to buy was also down 20%. So from that perspective, when you're measuring income as the goal, you actually are in the same situation. But relative to a pot of money, you're not. And conversely, investing in cash, you may say, wow, I got 5-6% this year, so I didn't go backwards. I'm great. I'm on track for retirement. But if the cost of your annuity went up 20%, well, you're 14% behind.
Sure. Let's throw another spanner in the works. We've spoken about my dad. What about me? Someone who has a longer prospect of working and employability. The key considerations that I should also be looking into at the moment, given the fact that we often say when you're younger, you invest a lot more into equities. But given the volatility in the market, I've been nervous myself.
Absolutely. and I think we have to recognize that a lot of what you'll contribute towards your retirement plan is in the form of your human capital. It's your future contributions. You've got a long way to go until retirement. Well, the reality is a goals-based framework would see, can you retire next year or not? And more often than not, it will suggest that people had your accumulated balances and what you're going to be contributing into the pot, which is your future contributions of human capital, and be able to make that decision as to whether it's enough. And you can bring that in. And generally, as a rule of thumb, it's going to mean high equity, high risk is needed to get to the level of income needs that we all have in retirement. Because to get to that magical 75%, that's very hard. That requires high real returns and a contribution rate that's generally at least 15%, and preserving your assets. It's a long road, and I think most South Africans would count themselves lucky to get to that 75%.
You are quite right. As you say, that 15% is difficult to get to, and preserving, which we always hear in South African media, is the key issue, where a lot more people are letting go of their jobs, cashing in on their pensions, using that money, and then starting from scratch again.
Absolutely.
I take it that's a huge no-no.
Well, it's something that's easy to do when you're only seeing that money as a pot of money. We treat our retirement planning accounts as bank accounts. We treat them as, because The very first statement you receive when you join a plan or you start saving in a product is your pot of income and how it changed in percentage terms over the period. You were not used to thinking of it as an income provider in retirement. If you saw that by accessing those funds early, you now had half of the income available to you at retirement, and it actually showed you in cold you were on track for 7,000 Rand, now you're on track for 3.5. I'm not so sure you would do it, or at least you would think twice about where that income is being deployed. But by showing that pot every single month or every 6 months, if that's when you get your statements, it's a very tempting source of funds that are in front of you. If you're on a diet and every day you walk in and part of your lunchbox is a delicious muffin, your favorite, and you put it away and you put it away, but it keeps getting put in front of you, one day you're going to have a bad day. And as you said, you're facing financial distress at work or you change jobs, that money is put in front of you. If it wasn't shown as a fund credit or a pot of money, but rather it was just shown receiving in retirement, I think that the preservation rates would be a lot better.
Long story short, Sean, keep the muffins for a later day. We've said quite a bit, but let's quickly recap on the key takeaways from this discussion. Sean, clearly one needs to have nerves of steel, secure discipline, and staying away from those muffins that you alluded to. But for the viewers watching tonight, what do we need to bear in mind when it comes to a goal-based investing?
Well, 1, income is our goal. 2, we need to have an investment strategy that somehow links to that goal. It's got to be bespoke for you. And the third one is that you should revisit that strategy at least annually, but potentially more often if your circumstances change.
And a realistic outlook, as you said.
Realism is the most important thing.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing your views with us. That's where we leave it for Personal Finance tonight. A big thank you once more to Sean Levitan, who is the Chief Operating Officer. 15% of your income into retirement. Get in touch with us and share your thoughts, and we'll pose them to Sean later on and get him back to give you feedback. You can send your comments to @CNBC Africa using the hashtag Finance410 or to myself @Kukumfupi on Twitter. Until next time, take care, everyone.
This is CNBC Africa's freshest and youngest offering. It's about us, the ones who want to go beyond the hustle, the ones who are keen on breaking the back.
He's already on the right track with that goal to conquer the world. You've got to think that big. So you've got to find something that actually disrupts the whole business model and changes things.
How have you ensured that in your own personal journey that you've consistently reinvented and out-innovated in